Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. It is Saturday morning. It's fairly early Saturday morning, about 9 a.m. There's a reason I am up and out the door so early. Today, I want to go to Orange City Racing and Card Club and I want to play some 2-5. And I've noticed that on Saturdays, they tend to run multiple tables of the 2-5, a main game and then some must-move games. And if you don't get into the main game early enough, what happens is you get moved over there and there's people with monster stacks, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I'm trying to short buy for $600 and playing this game, so I'd rather get there when they first open the main game and try to compete early with those guys. So that's why I'm up so early, that's why I'm off. Hopefully this works. We'll find out in about 45 minutes. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. Let's get to it. So my strategy seems to have paid off because when I arrived at about 9:40, I was the 7th player on the list, and they got the game going about 15 minutes later. The max buy-in for this game is $800, which only 2 people bought in for. I bought in for $600. I should also note, it's the day before my birthday, so I'm looking for a little bit of birthday run good. In the very first shuffle of the night, we're in +1 and we look down at Ace Queen of Clubs. It folds to me and I bump it up to $15. The big blind is the only caller, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is 7, 9, 10 with 1 club, so I flop 2 overs and a backdoor straight and backdoor flush draw. My opponent checks, and I check looking to apply some pressure on any club or face card turn. Why not get both? The turn is a jack of clubs. My opponent bets out for $15, and I'm going to stick to the plan, and I bump it up to $55. My opponent thinks for a bit, but he folds, and we win this first one. I think winning the first one's important. You can really set the tone for how the rest of the day is going to go, so I'm glad we're scooping in this first one, even if it's a small one. A couple shuffles later, we're in the big blind, and we look down at King Queen of Clubs. We see a raise from late position to $20 before the cutoff calls. It folds over to me, and I re-raise to $60. Both the late position and cutoff player call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Queen 6-8 with 2 hearts, so a flop top pair here. With the action on me, I put out a c-bet of $95. The hijack is the only caller, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is an awesome card. It's a 4 of clubs, so it's brought in some extra equity with a flush draw here. Action on me again, and this time I bet for $250. I'm trying to get value from a worse queen while still appropriately charging hearts. My opponent thinks about it, but then he folds. We're 2 for 2. We're straddling from the button and we wake up with pocket queens. We see both blinds complete, as does +1. It folds to the hijack and he bumps it up to $60. It folds to me, and the hijack is a player waiting for the 5-10 game, and he just screams aggressive player who's going to push the action. So I want to raise, and I have to figure out a good size that's going to allow us to get all the money in on the flop. So I bump it up to $200. Both blinds fold before the hijack then calls out a turn. +1 seems a little flustered by this, but then he folds, so now the hijack can call with what looks to be about $400 behind, so we're looking for a good flop here. The flop is Jack 7-7 Rainbow. Pretty damn good flop. My opponent checks and I jam. However, it's for $576. I didn't realize he had so much money, but there's no sense in messing around. He's not just going to call off a $300 bet, so I might as well be the one to jam. He does snap me off though. He asks if I have an overpair and I show it to him. The turn's a 9 and the river is a 5. He says nice hand and we win this nearly $1,600 pot. A couple of hands later, we're in the hijack and we look down at King 10 of spades. It folds around to +2 who makes the call. It folds to me and I bump it up to $20. Action on the cutoff and then he re-raises to $50. It folds back to +2 who makes the call, and getting some good pot odds I call as well. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is King 5-8 Rainbow, so I've got top pair and a backdoor flush draw. +2 checks, and I check it over to the pre-flop raiser, who surprisingly checks behind. The turn is a 5 of spades, so it pairs the board, but now it gives me a flush draw to go along with top pair. +2 checks. With the equity I picked up, I need to start building the pot, so I bet $90. Then we see the cutoff flat. I don't really like that. Back on +2, and then he jams for $226 total. It's back on me, and +2 limp called pre-flop, so I think I can rule out hands like ace-king and kings and aces. I'm not really sure what suited aces he shows up with here either.
It's only $130 more to win 465, so I'm getting a good price. I don't think I should raise here as I'm just incentivizing the cutoff to call and draw out, so I decided to just flat. The cutoff very quickly folds, plus 2 rolls over pocket 8s. I call out for a spade thinking I need one, but he's got a boat, so I'm looking for one of the last 2 kings, which I don't get on the river and he wins this one. Didn't see pocket 8s there. Nice hand, sir. We're in the cutoff, and once again we look down at pocket queens. We see 2 calls before the action gets to the hijack, and he bumps it up to $30. Action on me, and I put in the 3-bet to $115. It folds back to the original raiser who calls, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is Queen 7-4 Rainbow, so I have flopped top set on a super safe board. The hijack checks, and I think there's merit to checking here as I have the board so locked up, but I want to start building a pot, so I down bet to $60. The hijack calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 6 of hearts, so it brings in a flush draw and also brings in some weird straight draws. My opponent checks for a second time, and now I want to start getting some more value, so this time I fire for $235. Back to my opponent who's thinking, and he doesn't look comfortable. I may have gone a touch too big here with this bet. He thinks for about 30 seconds, but then he folds and we win. We're in the big blind and we look down at 10-8 of diamonds. We see 4 calls and I decide to go ahead and just check my option. I could probably raise here, but I don't want to bloat the pot up too much, so we're off to a flop 5 ways. The flop is King 3-8, so we've got middle pair and a flush draw here. It checks to me, and I bet $10. We get 2 callers, so I'm off to the turn 3 ways. The turn is an ace of diamonds. It's a really interesting card giving me my flush and also removing the possibility that somebody was drawing to the nut flush. I continue here for $40, and the button is the only caller, so we're off to a river. The river is a 10 of clubs that doesn't change the strength of my hand. I want to get a 3rd street of value here. With the board being connected the way it is, I think a small bet is preferred over a large bet, so I bet $75. I'm just laying him a price that's way too good to fold to. He makes mention that I must be dying for a call, but he pays it off. I show and he flips over ace 3 for 2 pair, so we're going to win another one. The very next hand, there's an under the gun straddle. We're in the small blind and we look down at ace queen offsuit. It folds all the way to the cutoff who calls. It then folds to me and I bump it up to $35. Kind of a small raise in hindsight. Surprisingly, the button straddler folds, but the cutoff calls, same guy from the last hand, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is ace queen 8 rainbow, so I flop top 2 here. I check and the cutoff immediately checks behind. The turn is a 10 of diamond, so brings in a diamond draw and connects king jack for a straight. I need to start getting some value here, so I bet $40. There are plenty of hands I can get value from, like straight draws and flush draws and worst 2 pairs. The cutoff once again calls, so we're going to the river heads up. The river is a king of spades. It's a pretty gross card as now there's a 4-liner to the straight, but the flush draw did miss. I check and my opponent fires for $75. There are a lot of hands that beat me here, but I think 2 pair is just a little bit too strong to fold to an aggressive opponent. I don't think I should raise as I probably only get called by better, so I just flat. He says we're good, we show it, and we win again. There's a button straddle, we're in the hijack, and we look down at pocket 6s. We see 1 caller before the action gets to me, and I decide to call here. The action on the cutoff, and he raises to $60. The button straddler calls before it folds back to me, and I decide to go ahead and call out of position. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 5-10-4 rainbow, so I've got middle pair here. The action surprisingly checks through, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 3 of diamonds, so I picked up an open-ended straight draw. With no one showing any interest on the flop, maybe I actually have the best hand here, and if so, I should probably bet, so I bet $90. The cutoff folds, but the button calls, so we're off to a river heads up. The river is a queen of clubs, so no straights improved, and the flush draw bricked out. Action on me, and I fire for $150. Now looking back, it's a bad bet size. I put it out as a blocker bet, but I'm really worried he may have slow played something like a set, so I'm not happy when he jams for $693 total. This is a really uncomfortable spot. Straight and flush draws have bricked out, so could an overpair play this way? Could he have a hand like 6-7 suited? all I really have is a bluff catcher, and it'll cost me everything I've made today. So I end up folding. Now, that's probably flawed logic. I really should just be playing the math of the situation and not involving the emotional side of it, but I did what I did and I folded. I asked him to show me a bluff, and he flips over ace-jack offsuit for ace-high. His turn call set up the river bluff, he said, so well played, sir. You got the better of me this time. We were posting a dead blind in the cutoff, and we look down at queen-jack offsuit. We see one call before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $15. The action's on the button now, and he 3-bets to $50. It folds all the way back around to me, and queen-jack isn't going to play great post-flop, but I also don't want to fold and give the table the impression that they can always 3-bet me and get me to fold and get me off my hand, so I end up making the call. We're off to the flop heads up. The flop is queen 6-7 with 2 hearts, so I've got top pair and a backdoor flush draw. I check to the aggressor, and he bets $50, same size as his pre-flop raise. With top pair and my backdoor flush draw, I feel I actually could have the best hand here, and I want to get money in so that we can play for stacks on a good turn card, so I bump it up to $150. My opponent very quickly calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 2 of hearts, so it does bring in the flush. I think this card is better for me, though, than it is for him. He's got about $350 behind, so I jam. He doesn't snap call, so that's a good sign. He's giving it a lot of thought, and the longer he thinks, I think the more I want to call here, but eventually he makes the fold. We're under the gun, and we look down at ace-king offsuit. I'm going to open the action for $20. It folds around to the low jack who makes the call, as does the hijack. Folds to the small blind, and he calls as well, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 10-jack-4 with 2 clubs, so I flop myself a gut shot with 2 overs. It checks to me, and I decide to start with a check to see how my opponents are going to play it, but it actually checks all the way through. The turn is an ace of clubs, so brings in the flush, but it gives me top pair. It checks to me again, and now that I've picked up top pair, I'd rather bet than check and have someone bet into me. If I get raised real big, then maybe I can get away from the hand, so I fire for $65. Plus 2 calls, as does the small blind, so we're off to a river 3 ways. The river is a 5 of spades, a complete blank. It checks to me, and since I didn't get raised on the turn, I feel I probably have the best hand here. So, I bet $265, about a pot-sized bet. The low jack folds, and the small blind very quickly folds, and we win another one. We're in the small blind, and we look down at ace-6 of hearts. We see 3 limps before the action gets to me. I complete, and the big blind checks, so we're going off to a flop 5 ways. The flop is ace-6-4 with 2 diamonds, so I flop top 2 on a pretty connected board here. It checks to under the gun who fires for $20. We see a call from the hijack before the action gets to me, and I want to raise and start building the pot plus properly charged draw, so I bump it up to $80. Under the gun very quickly calls, but the hijack folds, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a queen of spades. I don't think it really changes anything. I fire on this card for $200. I'm looking to charge a single ace, and once again, under the gun very quickly calls, so we're off to the river. The river is a 9 of hearts, and once again, I don't think that's changing anything. Confident I have the best hand here, I need to get more money in. And after watching the footage back, it's clear I need to blast off on this river, but in the moment, I only fired for $275, which is less than half pot. I guess my rationale was he's probably not going to call a huge bet here, so I need to try to get some value, but realistically, I probably should have bet closer to $400. As expected, he's not calling, and we win this one. The very next hand, we're on the button, and we look down at 6-7 of diamonds. There are 3 calls before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $20 with suited connectors. We see 3 calls, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 6-7 jack with 2 clubs, so I flop bottom 2 here. It checks to the hijack who fires for $60. He has about $260 total, and if I raise, I'm not sure I want anybody behind me tagging along, so I'm going to bet big here and try to isolate, so I raise to $310. It folds back to the original bettor, and he ends up calling. He has jack 7 of spades for top 2. Just gross. The turn's an 8 of spades, the river is a king of diamonds, and he'll win this one. In the final hand of the night, we're in the hijack, and we look down at ace-4 of hearts. We see one early position caller before it folds to me, and I bump it up to $20. We see calls from the cutoff and the big blind, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is ace high with 2 spades, and it checks to the cutoff who bets $30. The big blind very quickly calls. Action on me, and with top pair and a weak kicker, I think all I can really do is call here, so I do. We're still off to a turn 3 ways. The turn is a jack of diamonds, so now it brings in a second flush draw. The big blind checks, I check, and the cutoff, who's been the aggressor the whole time, ends up checking behind. The river is a 4 of diamonds, so now I've got 2 pair, but the backdoor diamonds come in. It checks to me, and I've got to fire off with a bet here in case I'm ahead, so I bet $120. The cutoff then starts showing his hand to other players at the table, and they're talking about it being a monster flop, so he probably had some sort of combo draw. He ends up folding. Early position also folds, and we win again. A little over 4 hours, and I'm up almost $1,000, so I decided to go ahead and just rack up, book the win, and move on to birthday celebrations.
So we're going to wrap that up. We're going to book a win. Interesting day. I think I played pretty well. I mean, it's hard to play bad when you're playing tight aggressive like that. Obviously the pocket sixes hand didn't go my way, and I don't know, that's a hero call situation. I talked to my buddy Anthony, and more times than not, that guy's going to flip over a winner, and I'm the idiot that asked him to show me a bluff, and he did exactly that, so kind of my own fault there. Then I misstepped with the king 10 of spades, getting it all in there with the flush draw and the top pair. My flush draw was no good, but other than that, I think I played a really good solid session. So today we were in for 600, out for 1522. So booked a nice $900 win. If you guys enjoy, like and subscribe. See you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.